Oh. Yeah, yeah.
Andrew's good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes. Call the meeting. Thank you all for being here on this beautiful spring day, and the faster we get through the agenda, the more we're going to enjoy a spring-like evening. So that might be an incentive for us to work expeditiously. I'll ask our secretary to call the roll.
Chair Kaplan.
Here.
Vice Chair Kleist, I know he is on. Scudger,
Here.
Matt Harris,
Here.
Dean Hepfeld, Jesse O'Connell,
Here.
Marie Orr, Kristen Phelps, Kendall Taylor, Jason Thomas, Arthur Wicks. Chair Kaplan, you have a quorum. Those absent are Kendall Taylor, Jason Thomas, and Arthur Wicks.
I know Art is begun a parental leave, so he will, I think, be back in our June meeting, or maybe not even until after the summer recess. Kendall has an excused absence tonight, and Steve is joining us online for the first hour of the meeting. He's on work travel right now. So we'll move into our public comment period. And so I'll go ahead and read our public comment policy, but since those who would speak are here, I'll read it this way. So we're about to convene to a public comment period of our meeting. All dashboard meetings include a public comment period at the beginning of the meeting, as we believe it is crucial for us to hear from our riders and community members. The board is here to listen. However, please keep in mind that public comment is not designed to be a discussion. Accordingly, please do not expect the board to respond to your concerns or questions tonight. We take any concerns and questions seriously and need sufficient time to process and research any issues that may be. Board members will respond to your questions and concerns at a future meeting or have the proper staff member get back to you at the appropriate time. Please note that personnel matters are not a part of the public comment period. However, please know we take any personnel questions seriously. You're asked to contact the Dash administration with any such concerns. We ask that all speakers and members of the audience maintain civility and respect for any divergent views that others possess. Further, we ask that speakers please address their comments to the board directly rather than the audience. The board will take pre-registered speakers first, and I will invite others who wish to speak who may not have pre-registered. Future meetings, you may pre-register on the website dashbus.com on the board directors page. I will now call the first speaker. Please remember each speaker is allotted 3 minutes for your comments. And if you're speaking on behalf of the Neighborhood Civic Association, please identify yourself accordingly and be recognized for 5 minutes. Do we have any pre-registered speakers?
Bob Rodenberg.
Is that the speaking okay?
Well, I mean, maybe you want to go over there, so you know.
Whatever works best.
Just I'll do that, and that way then everybody really can see.
Oh, right.
See,
It's an honor. You have to stand on it to speak from this location. Good evening. Last month, we saw a short video which I believe was intended to attract new Dash riders. While I certainly applaud that initiative, if its purpose was to attract new riders, I think the video would have the opposite effect. The time-lapse images of overcrowded buses and the captions that said that passengers are therefore often left behind when their bus passes their stop because they're full, that wouldn't convince me to ride Dash. Rather than show a chaotic bus packed like sardines and implying that I might be late for my appointment because the bus might pass me by, I would suggest the video instead show how comfortable and dependable Dash buses generally are, because they are. That's the truth. Speaking of increasing ridership, at a board meeting, last board meeting, someone mentioned the TfL, Transport for London, where I'll be next week, and the excellent wayfinding material that they produce. You may remember at a board meeting last year, I extolled the virtue of spider maps, which are designed to show the local area and where all the buses go. And Mr. Chairman, you asked me to speak with Camilla after that, which I did, and I left her some samples of the spider maps to look at. And
30 seconds remaining.
And reminiscing a bit, I found that in 2016, I had produced my own spider map for Park Fairfax, showing places that you could go to at that time, like Old Town, which you can't go to anymore directly on the bottom. But anyway, it was a pretty primitive, but it was published in our newsletter, and I hope some people got the hint. So while I'm not in London, when I'm not in London,
Your time is up. Please finish your comments.
Working with that, I'm getting the word out about the joys of writing up. Thank you.
We could get a copy of your comments, and if that spider map for WMATA might, we certainly can pass that on to the marketing department. You can email those to Beth if you don't want to, if you don't have copies, you want to give up tonight, or but.
I could give this to you now, and I could also.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, everybody.
I could also, Bob, I could just speak to the video. Sorry, it didn't come through clearly. The video was, that you saw last meeting, you were assigned for decision makers who aren't riding Dash, who need to make decisions about added service and capacity because of overcrowd. It was not about bringing passengers to ride. We are going to be doing one of those positive business too. So thank you for your comments. Yes, that's for, right, exactly. For members who might have a conversation, who don't understand why we're having issues with crowding, what's going on. We want to make sure they see the.
Thank you.
Is there any additional questions? Is there anyone in the room? Is there anybody online who wishes to be recognized? Please use the raise hand feature. We'll pause. Give you a chance to do that.
Daniel Nixon.
We're going to unmute.
Hi, I'm sorry. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you much. I just wanted to raise the question in terms of the Dash system. How will it be modified or increased, I guess, in terms of access for both seniors and elderly folks to more easily be able to monitor both the departure and arrival times for Dash Transit? Will there be any of the technology or so that will be useful for being able to do that? And also the access getting on and off the vehicles themselves. Is there any more enhancements, to your knowledge, that Dash is looking at for making the actual transit use of the system more accessible for not only elderly but also physically handicapped persons to get on beyond what we have today? I just wanted to raise that question as to whether that's in the planning as far as Dash's systems, and has that been looked at other systems around the country and around the globe in terms of making it more accessible?
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. Make sure we get your contact information, because we would like our customer service staff to follow up with you specifically about some of the real-time arrival information that we have, both signage as well as apps that are available. And I know I formerly served on the Commission on Aging. I just rotated off, and I know staff is engaged regularly with the Commission on Aging and the Commission on Persons with Disabilities to ensure that we are hearing the needs of our older adults as well as those with disabilities. And I know I've talked at this group as well about things like the different lifts to help assist way that we secure wheelchairs on vehicles. And so I think we could go into more depth of that by connecting with the appropriate staff. And we'd also welcome any suggestions that you have, observations as a writer as well. And so we encourage that to be a dialogue. So we don't have your information. If someone's on Zoom, do we have their email address or?
We may get it from registration, but Mr. Nixon, if you could call the main dash line tomorrow during business hours, we'd be happy to connect with you. It's 703-746 dash. And we'll connect you with someone to have a conversation. Does that work?
Okay, yes, if let's see, it says 743-746 dash.
703-746 dash.
Okay, yeah, and just tell them that they're leaving information from the meeting.
Yes, please.
They'll know what it is. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Comments, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to be recognized online?
Someone with the last name Lee. I'm gonna activate them now.
I'm gonna unmute you.
Hello.
Yes, hi. We can hear you.
It's like their square disappeared right after they said hello.
Oops. Let's try this again.
Here I am.
Okay, there you go.
We can hear you.
Thank you. I've had 2 life events that have introduced me to Dash in the last few months. One was that I retired from federal service, which I'm now very happy about. And I used to drive into DC, so I didn't know, I didn't utilize the buses. And soon after that, I had shoulder surgery, which prevented me from driving for a few months. So I have to say that I have now taken every Dash bus line to the very end just to see where it would go. And I am thrilled beyond belief at where I can get to in Alexandria and beyond. And even though I'm driving again happily, I will definitely utilize the bus more. So I think I probably added to your ridership numbers quite a bit over the last few months, and I'm very happy about that. I have 2 comments from the last meeting, and a comment and a question rather. One is about the comment about people, tourists mostly, not knowing that they can just hop on the 30 or the 31 in Old Town and go, all the way to between Braddock and King Street Station, but primarily up and down King Street. There is nothing on the signage, either at the trolley stops or the Dash stops, and often they're one and the same, that indicate yes, the buses say it's free, but there's nothing that anyone would really recognize to know that the buses go, in fact, along the same route, at least in Old Town.
30 seconds remaining.
So I would suggest you look into that. And I am just curious, and I don't know the history behind it, but why the 30 and the 31 buses follow the exact same route between Braddock and King Street? Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. I want to congratulate you on your retirement from federal service. I work for the federal government. I'm actually the retirement counselor of my agency, so I have a lot of people in my office these days. So I hope it's been a good. It sounds like you've found a lot of actually good things to do and very, very constructive. We appreciate the feedback. Our general manager has captured those, especially on something we do talk about. And I think last month you heard with the consolidation of bus stops, some effort we're trying to make to ensure that there's uniformity between the trolley and the 3031, the Old Town circulator, where they overlap. But we appreciate your input and look forward to any other suggestions that you have. And certainly you can communicate as well between meetings with our customer service as well. The number we just gave out to the previous speaker is a great way to convey feedback as well, if you want to do that.
I have that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Thank you for all who participated this evening.
Your
Moving to the So we have our stockholders meeting scheduled. We mentioned last night that it was mostly approved. We now have confirmation from council. It's gonna be at 6 p.m. It's gonna be here in this building in the council chambers. We have there's the kind of 45-minute version of the stockholders meeting, the 15-minute version of the stockholders meeting, kind of depending on the year and the needs of council. This is a 15-minute stockholder meeting version, so it will be mostly just the business items. We're hopeful that we have enough time to provide some very high-level bullets and highlights of kind of the Dash accomplishments and kind of the year to come. And I've asked Josh to help me just craft some remarks. In addition, there's a presentation that I think has already gone to the city clerk that will also talk about some of the enhancements of Dash, particularly on some of the areas where service has been added by council in the last few years. And we have a great story to tell of how much ridership has grown on those routes. So we'll make sure that we get the stockholders presentation to all of you. And for those who are able to join, again, March 25th, 6 p.m., either in person or virtual, certainly appreciate your participation in that. Again, it will be a fairly short meeting, but it's helpful sometimes because council's reappointing us and we want them to show that, we're engaged. And also we do hear some questions and comments that may inform our own discussion about budget and other items as we go forward. So I'll ask Beth to poll the board just to find out whether you plan to be there in person or virtually, and I'll make sure we recognize everyone who's joining. I know members of our Dash Advisory Committee were originally going to have their meeting that night, and they were thinking about, should we change it to a different night? I don't know if they made a decision on that since we spoke, but
I think they did. I think they're gonna join. They moved their.
Yeah.
oh, okay. So I know the chair and vice chair of the DAC wanted to come to the stockholders meeting as well, so I'll make sure to recognize them if Nathaniel and Jim are there. I did want to share, as we prepared the docket for the stockholders meeting, that Steve Kleist, our vice chair, who joins us virtually tonight, is going to be leaving the board in June. Steve has served over a decade on the board and shared with me a few months ago that his own retirement will be upcoming, and then also that he is grandkids in Texas are calling. And so Steve has agreed to stay on through the end of the year. And so we'll be reappointed as part of the docket, but with a notation that he's going to step off. And Steve, I do hope that if you're in town, and we'd love for you to be in town in June, because we want to talk about your over a decade of service on the dashboard. And so I hope that we're able to spend some time recognizing you before you make your next big move. Any questions about the stockholders meeting? Well, I thank all of you for your willingness to serve again on the board and look forward to continuing to work with all of you. I'm going to hold the formation of the nominating committee until the April meeting, just because we should all get reappointed before we pick a committee that will have officers. So we'll pick a committee to do that in April, and they'll report out in May. And as Steve is the vice chair, at the very least, we will have to pick a new vice chair for our board. Hillary, I'm going to turn.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Couple quick updates for you all, and then I have one thing that is not on here that I just remembered that I think is a good quick discussion item for you all. But just wanted to note that the 200 block of King Street is being closed on Friday to vehicles and reopened for pedestrians, and that will go through the end of September. And over that time, staff will evaluate the project, and council will then make a decision if it should remain closed or reopen to vehicles. I noted in the packet also, we did a project in kind of the Park Fairfax area, upgrading some bus stops, we removed one parking spaces at some bus stops to make them ADA compliant, and we will continue to update our internal dashboard where we're trying to track kind of our inventory of bus stops and where as we upgrade with different amenities and ADA compliance, make sure we have that all tracked so that we can prioritize where we make changes to hit stops. We are kicking off our high crash intersection audit project. There were 7 intersections on the west end of the city that were high crash intersections, and we received a federal grant. We received the grant about a year ago. It took a while to get the agreement, but we're kicking off the engagement where we're asking people, getting their feedback on those intersections. And we'll be doing a bunch of data collection this spring so that we can have more community engagement and develop some concept plans for those intersections. There are bus stops at, I think, most of them, South Van Dorn Street, Seminary, and then King Street, Upper King Street. I did note in here, you all might remember, we presented some projects too that we typically go after funding for with the state through the Smart Scale program. We did not receive any funding in the last round, so we were hopeful this round. It did not go as well as we had thought. We have only received the staff scoring, so there's still going to be a public hearing on these projects. But typically, there's not a lot of changes after the staff scoring comes in. I think Northern Virginia has been pretty loud that we were really disappointed. There were only 4 projects in Northern Virginia that got funded or that were recommended for funding. One of the city's project was recommended. It was our smallest project at Duke Street and Route 1, but you all might recall, we talked a lot about the Eisenhower Avenue and Van Dorn improvements, and then the Upper King Street project that we had put in and had done a ton of work with the state getting those applications. And so we were really disappointed that those were not recommended for funding, but we will continue to seek funds to construct those projects because they're really, really, really good projects. So you might hear more about that and some other funding opportunities coming up. However, we did hear back from the state that our CMAQ RSTP grant applications were funded. And so these are for 6 years out, these projects, but we had put in 3.5 million to construct bus bulbs citywide. So that's something that we like to do. It takes a lot of time to design and construct those, and there's not a lot of city funding for that. So that is one project that we will be able to move forward with, as well as another $2 million to implement our safe routes recommendations. There is one thing on here I did want to bring up with you all. We are going to be having a conversation with the Transportation Commission this month to talk about the makeup of the commission. I think what we are seeing is that we have a lot of boards and commissions that appoint members to the Transportation Commission, and it's really hard for people with the time commitment to, we haven't had a DASH representative on for a while. I know Planning Commission has 2 folks. That's tricky for them as well. Just all the other engagements that people have, it's hard to find folks that can do 2 boards. And also we want, to have a broader representation. So we'll be having a conversation with them. I would love feedback from you all, but what I think we were going to recommend was that the dashboard be able to designate somebody to be on the Transportation Commission. So we'll have that discussion. It would have to go through council if they want to update it that way, but it could be that it's not just Dash, maybe it's somebody from the DAC that we would want to recommend represent transit on that commission. So well, welcome any feedback on that we can share with the Transportation Commission from you all. But I know it's quite a time commitment to be on a board, and we understand that.
Are we, you mentioned other boards, are the other boards going to have that same practice, or are we the only one that's really had difficulty getting kind of?
Planning Commission has struggled as well.
Okay.
Because they have 2 people designated from the Planning Commission. So the Planning Commission members are on a lot of other.
Planning takes a commission. I mean, they have to designate seat on it. Yeah.
Right. So.
I think it's great. I think it's a great idea. I mean, the Commission on Aging has done that with the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, where they have actually a former commission member and who's then able to be very engaged because she doesn't have to go to all the other commission meetings as well. I think it's a great opportunity for others who potentially want to be more involved. So.
Okay. Well, then we will bring that up, and I will update you all at the next meeting, how that conversation goes. And then the next steps would be, it would have to be voted on by the Transportation Commission, and then it would be docketed for City Council because it is in their charter.
And if we need to do a letter, I'd be happy.
Great, thank you. I guess I have one more thing too, right? We have.
I have a question on it. So are there other cases where a board or commission designates someone who's not a member? I'm curious whether then that person, whether it generates the reverse problem where then they have to come to these meetings to report to us about what's happening in the Transportation Commission. And it still creates the time commitment of going to 2 local meetings. Good point.
I think there are some other boards and commissions where there are designees. I mean, I think it's also somebody that is gonna be looking in the Transportation Commission lens of transit. So, we have a lot of staff that are at those meetings that can certainly update on the happenings of the various meetings, but if there was somebody who would be designated, it could be perhaps that they're listening in on our meetings, not necessarily attending all of them. So,
The Commission on Aging did that with AHAC. That person does a written report that's in our packet, a summary, and then if they're on the Zoom, then they can be recognized as well. It seems to work. Person doesn't always join, you know, I just recently rotated off, the person wasn't always on the Zoom, but the written reports were pretty comprehensive, and the chair of the commission would often talk with them. There was something the commission needed done, so that he was then able to kind of sort of, you know, brief us on that, as well as staff who were participating in that.
So it's a two-way street.
Yeah,
I mean, human rights has like 4 designated liaisons to other commissions, but they're members and, you know, they're also, I guess, members of their respective commissions or committees or boards. So I don't really see the advantage of having an outside person. It seems almost like, I mean, as being said, does it really save that much time for that one individual? And, you know, are they committed? But I recognize realities too.
well, and if we would also have the ability, could we then at will say, okay, you know, that person hasn't gone to 3 meetings, we want to put someone else, or would we be stuck with them as long as they're kind of in a fixed term? Maybe we could work through
I
that.
think we can have those conversations. We'll obviously talk to the city attorney about this because it's in our code and our charter. But we can look into how that's worked with other boards and commissions and follow up. I mean, somebody, if we don't want to do that and somebody from this board would like to volunteer, please go right ahead. But it's been a challenge.
That day isn't working.
Wednesdays, it's the third Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m.
You would do it otherwise?
Yeah.
Okay, we were talking about moving it to your HOA.
Look, I went to one of the meetings and then I meant to follow up with you. It's gonna save all of that. We all pulled every other thought.
Well, yeah, that's helpful information. Let me bring that up. And
Sure,
we'll,
sure.
we'll talk to the group and see, because it's not just this board, right? Like, so we might have to update it anyway, but potentially we could allow dash rotating members or something like that. I'll follow up and get more information of what's allowed.
And I think, Josh, I don't know if it was relevant to this topic, so it looked like Steve might have put something in the chat. I saw it flash across the screen tonight, so he may have been trying to contribute to this
We
topic.
need to leave the meeting.
Oh, okay, all right. Because Steve actually was our liaison for a long time. And chaired the transportation commission for several years. Yeah, I mean, and certainly if we could keep it flexible, so then we could have someone off, you know, if we have somebody on the board or 2 that's working well, but then to not have representation as we have for probably about a year. You know, it'd be nice to have that flexibility to.
Let me look into it more and see what we can do and have the discussion with the commission. To see if that should be the component that they're interested in or.
I know we're going to present the WMATA letter as well. But just before we go on to that, so about the kind of smart scale funding, yeah, I agree with you. Those are great projects and I'm so sorry that they've been funded. Is there any, you mentioned something about the way they're scored and that there are some issues with construction costs and how that affects. Would that have to be fixed through legislation, or have there been discussions about whether that there's kind of changes to the overall program? It sounds like regionally that there's a lot of interest in looking at how they score them differently, but where would that have to come from?
They have these I feel like they have these conversations every round about what might change. Part of it is in legislation, but I think that there are certainly tweaks that they can make at the Commonwealth Transportation Board level. I think one of what we have realized in Northern Virginia is that our cost to construct things are a lot higher and there's no variable for that. So if we have the exact same project that they're implementing in Richmond, we have it here and it's a ratio and our costs are our costs are going to be higher. They're using Northern Virginia prices. So the exact same project would score better in Richmond than it's going to score here. So that's one of our major challenges. I think people were very surprised at the staff scoring that came out here. I think of the other project was NBTA actually put in a project for Alexandria, the Shirlington Circle. And that was, I believe it was designated as a high priority project, and that was not.
So we can go on to Lamont.
Yes, so we've included in the packet the letter that the board typically sends to WMATA during their public comment period for their budget. The city's total operating contribution to WMATA actually decreased to about 66 million from 75 million last year. But that was because there was a big contribution in FY 25 from the state, and we were kind of realigning what our baseline was. There was a revised budget that WMATA brought out that actually increased their projections of passenger revenue by $20 million. So that then decreased the cost to the city. So that is good that they are finding efficiencies and seeing increased ridership and seeing less fare evasion. I think that's really important. They did work hard to find efficiencies this year. It's still obviously a very costly endeavor for the city, but we want to see, their routes continue, and they'll be implementing the new routes with June 29th is when the new routes would go into effect. So we've been, included in your packet a letter, and that I believe is something we would need to all vote on. Happy to try and answer any questions about the WMATA budget.
Questions for Hillary? And you gave us an update, I think, a couple of months ago as well. It sounded like it was a very, no impacts, negative impacts to Alexandria, and then the changes related to bus service had already been vetted. Their new bus network.
Great.
Actually noticed the signs are up on Washington Street with the, they have the old routes as through June 29th, and then they have what the new routes are with the destination. So I thought that was actually really nice, because then you'll have people for several months are able to start associating instead of just changing everything over on June 29th. So I like that. Is there a motion to adopt the letter, or further discussion? So by Matt, is there a second? Second, Jesse. And all in favor? Aye. Any opposed, any abstention?
David, I don't know if you or Hillary drafted that, but I admire the self-control of not having a sentence after the open payment sentence that was like, Dash's fares will surely integrate seamlessly with open payments.
I had no role in drafting. Let me circle back on the stockholders meeting. Just wanted to mention with Steve's departure, Steve filled all of our seats that are held by citizens/riders are open to anyone, with the exception of one seat in our bylaws that has to be reserved for someone has transportation experience. And Steve filled that seat. He spent most of his career with New Jersey Transit, then worked for the NTSB when he moved down here. So with Steve's leaving the board in June, that will require us to recruit, because remember, we have a sliding number between 9 and 11, but because we're losing someone who's in a designated seat, we do have to fill that seat. And Steve had said specifically, he was letting us know and giving us that runway so that we could allow time for recruitment. However, just kind of been thinking about, and I shared this with Josh earlier in the week, it's a lot of, we get a lot of interest from people who apply, and this would be written a little more narrowly than we typically do when we recruit. But because of the interest that we get and because of the time that's involved, I would prefer to wait and fill the seat when we go to our stockholders meeting in 2026, which will be January, February, March. That way, in case we have another vacancy, that would be a general citizen vacancy, we can also recruit for that. And we're not getting, say, 20, we sometimes get 25 applicants. applications for, for a single position. And so that we're able to take as many people as we can based on the openings that we have. And it may still be, I hope all of you are still around the table, and then it may still only be for that one seat, but at least then we wouldn't fill, say, Steve's seat in the fall and then find out in the spring, okay, we've got to do another whole recruitment again, that's just for one person. And I think from an efficiency standpoint, we can kind of manage that now.
What are the eligibility requirements to the transportation?
Well, it's written very broadly. I actually went and looked on the bylaws, and actually in the document section, you can pull up our bylaws now.
Yeah,
And it just says a citizen who has transportation experience. So I thought, well, you could apply that very broadly and say Matt Harris represents airline pilots, but I think the intention behind it, though, is someone like a Steve who worked in a transit system and policy. I think they wanted maybe not to say, okay, this person only worked in transit operations versus policy. Because I thought about saying, well, we could designate, but I think we're stronger board having someone who has that experience. And so that's why I didn't want to say, let's, kind of move into it. But I appreciate you were willing to consider that, but
Yeah, I got you.
and we'll have to, we never, that change was made, I think, after Steve joined the board. So we've actually never recruited with that specific language. So we'll have to think about when we do recruit, what examples we'll give of, say, this is what we consider to be transportation experience. But we don't take a vote on, I just wanted to get your concurrence that it was fine to wait and do the recruitment for the next year's.
I think that's right, David. I think also just sort of maximizing time for us to think about who some likely candidates might be, directions to go in. I mean, I met a guy recently who's a retired New York MTA vice president and now lives here. Right? I think somebody like that would be interesting to talk to.
Yeah, definitely. We'll rely certainly on contacts that we get as we recruit to get word out. So we would probably, assuming that our stockholder meeting would be February, March of next year, we'd probably start a recruitment, say in October or November, just to not cross the holiday season, but to ensure that we get maximum visibility. And we'll set up a committee as we normally do to handle that. So that's great. Any other comments?
I just want to make sure I understand. So essentially, Steve would be rolling off in kind of April to June.
That's after the gym. So when we go to summer recess, they'll roll off.
And then essentially that transportation expert board seat would be open until the shareholders meeting next year from almost a year.
Right. We'll have Steve though for a formal, and then we don't meet July, August. So it would be about a 5 to 6 month period of time. The other thing is it's hard to get on council's docket. We'd have to have a special stockholders meeting if we did recruit, especially just to fill the board seat. And I'm also mindful of trying not to have too many, have to call too many meetings in front of council to fill those. Although it wouldn't take much time. I know our staff works very hard. I can attest to that every time we have to get in front of council. So I just also want to be mindful of their time. So we're not kind of then going with 2 board recruitments in the same case. The approval of the meeting minutes. There a motion to approve the minutes. They were included in our packet.
So moved, David.
Moved by Jesse, is there a second? Arish, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Same person abstains. We're gonna move into the staff reports. Oh, the financials.
Financials are included in your packet. This is not a question, but I will talk about the current budget.
Any questions for Josh? And Edward's here as well. Financials must look good.
Okay. Well, moving right along, Mr. Chair, members of the board, first part of my report is just simply to highlight ridership. Ridership continues to exceed the previous year, so we're very happy about that. We've had a lot of conversations about that, and we're going to continue moving towards another record-setting year for ridership. So good news there. Martin did include a summary analysis. We had some questions early on about what were the effects of the federal workforce returning to Dash and going back to the office. So you can see some of that information here that we are seeing marked increases, and I think they're continuing to monitor that. So Just offer if there are any questions specific to that. We're going to continue to watch that. But as noted here, lines 102, 103, and 104 are seeing that big impact. Of course, it is important to note, as mentioned in the packet, that those services do not have the level that they did pre-pandemic. So those high numbers that you see in 2019, we do not have the same frequency. We definitely going to need to continue to advocate for getting the additional frequency on those services, especially with more people, going in.
All right, Josh, I want to say I appreciate the inclusion of line 35 as well, which I think was something we hadn't thought of the post Pentagon as well. And I had a friend actually call me who said, if I leave at 6:45 a.m., I can get taking the 35 from the Pentagon, lives near Park Center. I can get on the bus okay, but if I'm leaving 15 minutes later, I can't. I'm going to have to let vehicles go by. So I think the impact of that route as well is carrying a lot of people returning to federal government, meaning into DC. Would like to see this continue through June, that we continue to look at this month by month, because I think the way return to office is being phased in, I think we're seeing a lot more March, and certainly April is going to be a heavy month for people going back. Right, so I think we're sort of just seeing the beginning of this. It'll be interesting to see if we do get above those 2019 numbers fairly soon. So thank you for putting that together.
Of course. So the next item here is just to give you all an understanding of what we're seeing in the city manager's proposed budget. This summary provided here is excerpts from the city manager's advertised budget and the budget synopsis. But I want to take a few minutes just to tell you all sort of the outcomes of what we're seeing and what has been presented. So I will say this is all good news. We are in a position in this situation that really has saved us from some drastic cuts. We are, from a personal perspective, very appreciative of the work that's gone into the budget process, and the fact that we are seeing our budget ask fully funded, which I'll come back to. But as mentioned here, the general fund operating budget is $956.5 million, so 3.2% increase from FY25, and there is no increase in real estate or personal property taxes. There is increased support in this budget with more funding to cover DASH, specific to our collective bargaining agreement, as we all discussed in the fall, and other inflationary costs of operations. There are $5.2 million allocated for DASH plus fleet replacements, and that is specific to the CIP. And then also $15.4 million for WMATA capital improvements supporting regional transit connections. There are additional benefits to this budget, including employee compensation for the workforce in the city. This is a step increase as well as a 1% pay scale adjustment for non-collectively bargained staff, and they have fully funded all of the police, fire, and labor and trades collective bargaining agreements. So great outcome there. Environmental and community benefits, expanded some curbside composting and glass recycling, and increased funding for community health and affordable housing. Again, high level summary here. Just wanted to highlight all of the work that they put into this and the benefits. And lastly, there are economic and service enhancements, including a new business accelerator pilot program to support local businesses and funds for early childhood support and a city food hub. Specific to DASH, I want to remind the board of what was submitted. This was back in the fall. The board submitted a 6.4% increase with a total of just over $37 million operating budget for DASH. That is our current services operating budget, and it does account for the collective bargaining agreements. So we're very pleased with that outcome. It means we have no service reductions whatsoever on the table. And no adverse impacts in our day-to-day operations. There are some very minor efficiency reductions that we worked with the city team to come up with. They are some savings regarding some software subscription costs and a reduction in printed ride guides. We were actually working closer with who we're working with. Go Alex, to fill that gap. So we will continue to have ride guides for people to use the service. So this is just a reminder of what we submitted and where we were. We did also submit some supplementals. The supplementals are not moved forward or recommended to council. This is a highlight of what those were. Again, just a reminder of what was previously submitted. I will say that considering the budget environment, it's not a surprise that none of these were advanced because it was an incredibly tight budget. And we've got to remember that we were asked for a 2% year-over-year increase, and we got a 6.4%. So substantial impact there on our current services. I just want to remind you of the budget calendar. It is available online at alexandriava.gov/budget. We are here on the 12th. The reason we're down here is because they are doing a work session upstairs. On the 15th, which is Saturday, there will be a public hearing for the budget. And on March 17th, which is Monday, we will be back here at City Hall to participate in the work session, which includes DASH. So myself and Edward will be present for that, and we'll certainly answer any council's questions as it relates to the DASH budget. The add delete process requires submittals by April 3rd. So that is a timeline regarding the next point of this conversation. And it's important that we get any comments to council before then, if they are going to be considered in any way regarding add delete. And then the rest of this is April 8th, another tax rate public hearing, add delete. Preliminary add delete is on the 22nd of April, final add delete on the 28th, and then budget adoption at the end of April. So my recommendation to the board in this is to consider, as you did last year and previous years, is to draft a letter to the city manager and city council recognizing the work that's gone into the budget. I want to say that everything that they've done to work with us has been incredible, and they've really been collaborative in doing that process. We were really concerned in the fall when that guidance came out because we don't have the control over the requirements of our collective bargaining agreement. So the fact that that was honored and funded is really great. We certainly recognize there are still priorities that have not been funded. And historically, the board has wanted to just make sure those continue to be highlighted. Certainly, it's up to you how you want to craft that. But Chair and I spoke, and he asked for some summary to be put up here on the screen for you to consider in your conversation and to guide us as to what we should potentially draft as a part of the letter. If you take this action tonight, you would give us feedback. We would draft a letter, work with the chair to finalize that, sign it, and get it sent in before the timeline here, which is early April. Happy to answer any questions as it relates to the budget. The last thing I will say is that we'll come back with our final revised budget next month. And basically what that is that's us reworking the budget based on the information that came from the city manager through the budget process. And then this board will adopt, that will start a public comment period for our budget. The board will adopt the budget.
So I think it's very good news where we sit. Because remember last year we were actually in a very defensive posture trying to save part of our commuter service on line 104. And so it really does show that the city has made an enormous commitment to an understanding of the transit's role in the community, is that we are able then to continue doing what we do in a year of some uncertainty. And so I think to your first point, that is very important that we offer that thanks to the city manager and council, who have all been champions of transit. So in terms of the letter, I think it's important we try to at least get a budget memo that deals with the unfunded portions of the new DASH network. So that way that's on the table for discussion. But probably we want to be mindful of how we push on that and really just trying to educate them about what we can do if there's additional funding that's available. I know, Josh, we also spoke, as you had mentioned in the fall, when the city manager issued his budget guidance specifically about schools, and that there was a need for DASH and this work with ACPS on long-term transportation, where there can be some ability to help us, for us to be able to help schools provide some transportation, especially in places where we're already going and have capacity. As you shared with me, I don't know if you want to provide some color in that or context in that conversation for what's possible in the near term versus the long term there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's a lot going on in regards to the conversations around ACPS and the transportation. We are actively involved in the conversation, trying to speak to what it is that we can potentially do and how we might do that. I think that I mentioned here in the second bullet, just mindful of potential impacts on service capacity, considering that we are very full in a lot of areas already. And we need to potentially look at investments to handle capacity. I think that's what the conversation, right, we were referring to. We could certainly build something in that kind of just reminds people of that. I don't think that the ACPS conversation is anywhere near a decision point at this juncture. And I think we're still a ways out. There's a lot of information yet to be shared and conversations to be had. So certainly if we want to speak to that, speak to capacity, we would want to do that. I will mention that the current services budget does have some supplemental service in it that we all talked about in the fall that is to address current overcrowding conditions and try to address some service reliability issues. So that's already going to be something to do.
And that is in the city manager's, the subsidy is sufficient. So open up to discussion as to how we want to craft the letter.
I have a question for Josh. I saw that in the CIP section, there's sort of two sections, one on fleet replacements, one on electrification. And one of them stated that grant funding would be needed to support our electrification goals. The other section restated what those goals are. But you didn't say it, but it seems clear that the goals are not funded, switching to 100% electric procurement after FY27 and 100% zero emission by 2037. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
That's correct. In fact, we don't even have the money to replace diesel buses with diesel buses in those out years.
So I guess, given that, I would like, especially the most sort of near term, like when we would need to be doing electric procurement to stay on those goals to be emphasized in our letter, because like council has set certain goals around the city's policy, Dash has set goals around this. They're not funded, and I think we should put a spotlight on that in a letter. I'm also continue to be disappointed in the use of the term clean diesel when referring to diesel buses. It's not clean.
So we certainly can make mention to the CIP, to your point, and talk about the electrification process.
So David, I'll respond to your comment about trying to thread the needle of emphasizing the importance of the new Dash network while acknowledging that we are not an environment. Last night, we did not advertise to raise the tax rate, right? So there aren't going to be new resources to carve up. And I wonder if one way we could do it is, letter starts, thank you for the budget, all the stuff. The next section is literally just bragging about Dash's recent accomplishments, our ridership numbers, climate impact, like all of the good stuff that we already have on hand that we measure, like a full paragraph of like, look at all of this great, awesome stuff that Dash is doing. The next section down is we have not yet realized the vision of the new Dash network. Were we to do that and sort of like let them connect the dots of like we get more of what we just talked about. So then we're not like directly asking for it, but we're empowering them to consider the relationship between those two things and think about it. And certainly I think Brigide's comments about sort of the things we need to do now if we are going to actually reach those goals would certainly fit very much into that framework.
Yeah.
Too, because even if, we're not directly asking and we're unlikely to get, like, it's, building the case for next year, wherever.
That's right.
I know that tying to some of the council priorities as well. I know they talk a lot about affordable housing, but Dash contributes to affordable living.
Right.
So I'm sort of thinking about that. Budget. One thing I do want to call out, and this is, Art is not here, but just kudos to Art for finding, we're looking at FY26 right now, but in FY27, there was an increase in funding for fleet replacement because FY27 is the big year where we need a lot more buses. And so some of the money that would plugged into unsecured grant funds went into MBTA 30%. And that's a little bit due to the fact that the Weston Transway maybe not gonna be constructed at that point in time, and so there was more money, but that's, it was moved into the funding for dash fleet replacement, extra like $5 million.
Yeah, so I think Praveen raises a really good point, especially about the council is still on record as supporting 100% electrification, I think by 2037. So
And we haven't changed our.
I guess I'm wondering, do they have to change? It's probably in the environmental action. So are they, given the federal environment that we're in, are they going to kind of say that that's still our goal, even if there aren't the resources, or has that, I don't know, those conversations have started, but I mean, and probably not the only place where there are different federal priorities, where there are things that we've talked about our own facility rehabilitation as well, but I just wonder, is council going to have to change that, or are they going to continue to say, this is still what we as a community have decided to do, even if we are going to blow past that because of money? I don't know how they will handle that.
And the other aspect, not just money, are they actually making electric buses? I mean, I know there was a backlog and we were having a hard time finding them.
And we've got 2 coming off the line here very shortly, not already.
So it's not a supply issue, it's,
Well, I mean, this could be a very long conversation, but this supply chain issues and the issues around manufacturers is a horrendous problem. And it's going to get significantly worse in this administration. I was on Capitol Hill last week speaking to Congress and many members and trying to point out the fact that with these tariffs, the largest bus manufacturer in North America is a Canadian company. And they're the only manufacturer that's been able to deliver a bus to us within less than 2.5 years. So,
yeah.
So, I mean, it's so to the point of the conversation around the goal, and you know, I think we're all 100% on the same page of restating that goal and prioritizing. And I think that what we're running into is the issue of the skyrocketing costs, and there's not even the money to buy a diesel bus. To your point, you're highlighting that with a clear how just articulate that. That's left. I think it will be an important component of bringing awareness. Just I don't see how, and the administration, we've got a big grant. We're trying to push through it. We're trying to make sure we don't lose that money. It's huge for us, but the guidance that we've been given from lobbyists is that there's no way we're going to get the work in this administration. So
I think it's important then to talk about capital letter as well. You have specific as to, I think you've articulated some specific suggestions as to what we should think. So can we?
The most recent information that the board has is from the presentation from, was it like 4-ish months ago?
Yeah.
That went into basically the volume of buses that we needed year by year. When the goal would say those need to be electric, essentially that's not funded.
right, just tie directly to that conversation. Sure.
A couple of things. So one, is there any risk that if there are real supply constraints, that by highlighting the need and supply constraints, that we're in a position where they're going to say, well, this is money you can't spend anyway because you can't source the buses? Is there a that I don't know, city council's got the information well enough on the budget matters historically, but I don't know if that factors involved.
Well, as it relates to that low note right now, right, the federal grant for electric buses. And we're gonna have to rethink what we do with that money based on what the numbers are that come back for the vehicles. Is that what you're asking? I'm not sure I understand your question.
No, are we saying that we are going to be talking about some of the macro issues in the letters? I thought I just heard that we were saying that, you know, the impact of terrorists and that kind of thing. Are we talking about actually discussing that or mentioning that in the letter? Maybe I missed that.
I mean, I would continue to have those conversations with council members myself. I didn't see that as being necessarily need to be in the letter, but alerting to, right, where we need to be and what we have to get there.
Yeah.
And then that generating questions and that generating those conversations. I think that would be the approach that I would expect And then I can come in and have those conversations around what are the things that are happening, what are we seeing, what are those kinds of things.
Got it. I'm just, I guess, raising the question of like, is there any concern that if you're basically saying, look, the number 2 bus manufacturer, the number 1 bus manufacturer is Canadian, can't even source buses anymore. There is a question of, look, if we allocate money to you, Dash, to do bus replacement, can you even buy what we're allocating money for? Does that raise that issue at all? And so we want to be careful either with the communication around like, hey, look, you know, there is a real supply issue here. Or the way we go about bus replacement. I don't know, but that's just the question. And the second thing I want to ask about is tech replacement projects, shift gears a little bit. Can you just remind me where we are on that project? In the funding
Did you say the tech replacement?
The deck replacement.
Oh, the deck replacement.
Parking.
We don't. We don't know where we are.
So,
But we are applying for bus-to-bus facilities, which is a state of good repair program that is not specifically electric. Low-No is the one that is specific to that. We don't know, but we're definitely going after that federal money for that. The deck replacement.
because that to me is a critical issue, right? Like, what's the impact if the deck isn't replaced? Do we have a sense of like what happens if its useful life burns out and how soon the system will be that's not taken care of?
We do know that it is safe at the moment and that they have been doing incremental repairs to extend the life of it. But I couldn't speak to, at this moment in time, I couldn't speak to what does that mean as far as timeline, because that's very much something the city is managing. But I think that if we don't get that project done, the decay is going to worsen and we're going to end up spending more money repairing. But right now, our mode is tackle everything that needs to be tackled as it comes up and work long-term to get a full replacement project. And the city is funding those incremental repairs. So they've built that into their capital budget. Is that helpful?
It is, yeah. I'm just trying to think in my own head about prioritization and like, let's just say that we were agnostic to the sources of funding and say, look, it's one pool of money and what's the most critical, or, you know, is it bus replacement in 2027 or is it the deck? And maybe that's not even a fair question to ask, but I'm just trying to think of that in my own head. And think about the letter and like to what degree. Yes.
I would say the rolling stock is probably more important to advocate for because the city is very much focused on the facility and the deck. And I think there's plenty of conversations going on around the priority of that. So I think my take would be that our role would be more to focus on the rolling stock as a priority.
Are there other comments related to? I think we've got some pretty good direction. We can put together a draft and I think it'll be helpful going back to the schedule. It's like, so our work session is next week. Okay, so we probably won't have it to them in time if we want to circulate. I would like the board to have an opportunity just to review the letter as a whole group. Just, you know, we could do it over a day or two, but certainly before. Well, I know we have to have, obviously they have to have it before the and lead submissions are due. So we would try to get it maybe to them by the end of next week. What's that?
Yeah. Once we take this feedback tonight, we're going to get this letter tomorrow.
And I was going to ask, in past years, we have occasionally testified at the public hearing. There is one this Saturday. There's also another chance when we have the tax rate for the ad delete public hearing, which is April 8th. That's an evening one. There's a Saturday public hearing as well for the budget.
Yes, that's this Saturday.
Oh, it's this. Oh, right.
This coming Saturday. Yeah.
Okay. So they're having. Oh, that's the tax rate and the ad delete are the same day, April 8th. We could testify on April 8th if we wanted to. If there's feedback on it, I also wanted to offer that, you know, as I said last month, I wanted to allow other board members to sort of have that role of being kind of the liaison and talking to council members about kind of their perspectives on the budget and not always being me. So I would also invite, if we decide to do public testimony, I would welcome one of my colleagues wanting to be the one to deliver that as well. So Justin.
This also strikes me as something that I hope that DAC feels empowered to sort of, again, that high level guidance and thank you for funding. Here's a personal anecdote about, why I care about DAC. I think,
Yeah.
rarely get 7 or 8 even engaged like that. It really makes a difference.
And they did a letter already to the manager when he was prepping his budget about the unfunded parts of the network. So I would fully expect that they will do a letter, and I know Josh and Camilla will convey to them the timeline to make sure that the letter is in time to have an impact on council deliberations. So it will be a letter at this point, it sounds like. All right, why don't we have a motion then to approve the drafting of a letter to council related to budget items as with the guidance that we discussed. So moved. By Matt, is there a second? Person, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Before I bring Jen up here, I just want to mention one other item, and that is that Dash will be participating in the state bus rodeo this upcoming weekend. If anyone is interested in seeing our competitors on the course, they are scheduled to start on the course at 10:35 a.m. at the Westox facility. I believe Beth has circulated the information to the board. But if there's just sort of if you're limited as far as timing and you just want to know when you could make an appearance, you're welcome to do that. Certainly, we will have folks out there cheering them on, myself included. But they have a whole weekend ahead of them, so they're going to have a great time. We wish them the best of luck. We hope for another trophy. I'd like to welcome Jen to the table here. You have not met Jen. She joined us in November. She is our digital marketing and content designer, and Jen has been doing a fantastic job having joined the team and helping to really elevate our brand and our visual components of what we do and our online presence and our outreach and our marketing. And you've just been doing a whole lot of different things. So she has been working hard on a refresh of our branding, and the intention of this presentation is to get your reactions, good, bad, or indifferent, and give Jen some feedback. And she's also going to be doing the same presentation, I believe, to the DAC at their next meeting as well, to get their input. But I will turn it over to you, and you can just advance with that little clip.
Great. Thank you for the introduction, Josh. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. It's great. We'll get right into this. Like Josh had mentioned, I started at Dash last November, and I'm bringing over a decade of graphic design experience with me, including logo design and brand identity design. And so this was an early project that was given to me when I started here. And looking at it as a graphic designer, there's nothing that's really bad wrong with these logos. There's also a lot of really good will from the public towards the Dash brand. So in thinking about any kind of redesign, I really wanted it to be seen as a refinement of what already works really well for the Dash brand. So these designs that I'm about to present have been through several rounds internally with Dash staff. And like Josh had mentioned today, get your feedback and opinions as part of our ongoing process. So let's get started. The first logo that I looked at is what I'll call the Dash word logo. This has a lot of strengths. The kind of bold typeface is really highly visual or highly visible on things like on the buses, on smaller applications. And even though it is a very kind of bold typography, it still has a very friendly and approachable feel. And that's something that I wanted to keep in thinking about a redesign. Some things that I thought can be improved upon, there's 3 main ones. The number one is the ligature, or like the single item that gets created with the A and the S touching. To me, this looks a bit unintentional and a bit unrefined, and sort of takes away from the impact of the overall logo. The second thing is the sort of visual tension that gets created in the negative space around the letter A, between the A and the D and the A and the S. Really hard letters to kind of work with visually anyway. So that was something that I wanted to explore in a redesign. And the third thing is the placement and size of the phrase Alexandria Transit Company. Having it so small and on top of the word Dash, to me, it's very visually imbalanced. It makes the entire logo hard to read when this logo is scaled down to small sizes. And having it on top, it kind of looks like it's wearing a little hat, and so that's something that I wanted to sort of help. So for my a lot of bus company logos that also use this kind of bold typography. Something that I noticed a lot of them also include is this sort of sheared effect. So the letters sort of skew forwards, that's suggesting motion. If there is supplementary text, it tends to go underneath the logo, and every letter in the logo can stand on its own. So in thinking about all of these elements, the design that I came up with for the Dash logo keeps the bold text that's very visible at small sizes or from far away, but still keeps the same friendly and approachable typeface from the original. Putting the letters closer together and creating this illusion of a stroke around each one reduces the issues with the negative space while also making sure each letter is visible on its own. Here's just a quick kind of mock-up of what that could look like on an existing Dash bus. So you can see that even in a reversed version of white text on a dark background, all of those letters have enough of a stroke around them so that you can see every letter kind of standing out on its own. Now, ways to incorporate the Alexandria Transit or Alexandria Transit Company in our rounds of feedback, it was determined that there's no real legal need to include the word company if you include Alexandria Transit in the logo. So my proposal was to drop the word company entirely and just have the phrase Alexandria Transit, have it be placed below the Dash logo itself. This allows it to be larger, which means that it has a better visual balance and more legibility with the Dash word logo itself. Also having each letter form kind of exist on its own means that we kind of open up the door to a lot more interesting visual treatments. As you can see, every single letter could have its own color, or you could put an interesting gradient in the background. It just sort of opens up a lot of creative options for this logo. So the next one that I looked at was the Dash bus logo. The strengths that I found with this really focus on the illustration of the bus itself. This is something that I find to be really unique to Dash. I don't see a lot of other transit companies using such kind of a friendly and approachable illustration of a bus. So I wanted to preserve that. A lot of the other elements in this logo I found to be a bit distracting from the bus, specifically the landscaping elements in the background, the Masonic monument, and the sort of trees and houses all kind of distract from the bus itself. The use of gradients in the sky and in the road are a bit outdated and make it hard to translate this logo to a single color. Another strength for this logo I found was the kind of suggestion of a circle in the logo. Circles are a great visual cue for a bus company because wheels are round. So I wanted to kind of keep that moving forward. But the way that the word Dash kind of interacts with the circular part of the logo currently kind of reminds me of a snow globe, and they're sort of stitched together in a way that looks, again, a little bit unbalanced and a little bit unrefined. So my idea for a redesign for this logo specifically was to take out all of the elements that I felt were extraneous while keeping the elements that I think work really well and make this a successful logo. So really bringing the bus to the front, retaining that sort of sunburst or starburst yellow in the background, yellow, of course, being Dash's primary accent color. I also wanted to retain the color green and suggest a horizon without being too busy with all of those illustrations of the road in the existing logo. Green is another accent color that we're trying really hard to incorporate in our branding to sort of showcase Dash's commitment to sustainability. Another thing that I changed here with creating this sort of crescent shape with the background means that you have this suggestion of a full circle when the Dash word logo is set beneath the bus. So you get this idea that the Dash word logo is actually a cohesive part of the entire logo. We mainly use this logo right now on our social media accounts, and like many of you know, the avatars for social media accounts tend to be to crop your image into a circle anyway. So I mocked this up and I think this logo works really well here. And again, it's a lot more visible at these smaller sizes on a phone screen, on these social media accounts. So the final logo that I'll talk about is the King Street Trolley. This one is already very different from the other two Dash logos. There are things that I think work really well about this logo. The first being the kind of illustration of the trolley in the center. It gives this kind of nice vintage feel, which I think the King Street Trolley as a brand really benefits from. And it also sort of calls back to the Dash bus logo as well. There are some parts that I find to be kind of areas for improvement. Now that Dash has really taken over operations of the King Street Trolley, I think it would be really useful to make a logo that more obviously fits individually with the rest of Dash logos. So because of that, I thought that the kind of burgundy color could be changed. This burgundy color is already not really the color of the trolley anyway, so it doesn't necessarily need to stay. Some of these little filigree elements around the word free don't really scale down very well, and including the text from Market Square to the Metro is unsustainable because this has already had to be changed with the changing of the King Street Trolley route. So that's an element that I felt could be removed. So some of my inspiration was looking at classic American railroad company logos. I really like the sort of shapes that a lot of them have and the use of strokes around the shapes. The other thing that I looked at were Japanese train stamps. In Japan at train stations, a lot of times you can put a stamp in a booklet or passport. And I thought that the existing trolley illustration actually resembled a lot of these stamps anyway. So in thinking about an updated logo, I wanted to retain some of those visual elements while also creating this sort of vintage, almost transit token look. The color scheme is sort of a vintage darker version of the Dash color. So it's more of a navy and a gold as opposed to kind of a bright blue and yellow. This version also incorporates a non-skewed version of the Dash word logo, which just fit visually better into this application. Something else I realized while I was working on these logos is that the King Street Trolley logo does not actually exist on the King Street trolleys themselves. They only exist on the signs. So this is a bit of a subtle update, but at the very front of the bus of the trolley, you can see a kind of yellow circle. There is kind of room to put this logo. I've also placed the updated Dash word logo on this mock-up in the back. Something else that I think would really help with an ongoing concern about having people realize that the King Street Trolley is also part of the Dash network is putting these logos on the street signs, especially now that all of the signs along King Street are the same at 3031 and King Street Trolley. I think it would just really reinforce the fact that these are all part of the same bus company. Okay. So here we can see all three logos next to each other. Again, my goal here was kind of creating more visual cohesion between the logos, the brand identity. And here you can see just a side-by-side of the current logos and my proposed logos. So like Josh had mentioned, our next steps for this will be to continue sharing it to the DAC and the Dash staff in general. Our plan for the rollout for this would be a kind of a phased rollout. So as new assets are needed, we would make sure that they would be introduced with the new logo. Things like digital logo applications could be done very quickly. And then as other things like printed assets are needed, we would just make sure that this would be applied. So yeah, thank you for your time, and I'm happy to hear feedback and questions.
Just a couple questions. I have no artistic ability, though I can barely express myself. Two questions. First of all, what's the rationale for removing the free on the trolley, and in fact, adding it to all of our logos? Just curiosity on that.
Yeah, so the trolleys themselves say free to ride. So there's that element already. The word free, it can cause a little bit of visual clutter, I think, with a logo, which to me should be more of a distillation of the brand. I think there is room to make sure that we include messaging around the network being free whenever we have the opportunity to. And that's something that I've kind of been thinking about, is trying to come up with some kind of good tagline to use in our social media marketing, dash, always fair, free, something like that. I don't think it necessarily needs to be part of the logo itself, but it should be part of the messaging.
And the other thing, I'm totally great with what you did. I think it's fantastic. If you took the dash and used italics, so it looks like it is moving, how did that look? And tell me, I look at the S and it looks like it sort of slows down dash, just the way it's sort of going almost backwards. That's my only visual kind of sense when I see that. How did it look in an italics font, if you will?
On the.
Just the dash, just dash, yeah, DASH, the letters.
If I don't know if I'm exactly understanding your question. The version up at the top is kind of what I understand as italic.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it is sort of tilted that way?
Yes.
Okay, in the S too?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
S, speaking of like the graphic designer, S's are very, very tricky
Okay,
letters to deal with. But yeah, definitely there's room to kind of further refine, making sure that S also looks like it's skewed at the
Colonial will make it an F instead.
That would be very interesting, yeah.
First of all, thank you. This is amazing, and I really appreciate the ruthless simplification. I think you used the word distillation, and I think that's like really important in branding and visual identity. I love that you've taken that approach to it. I have a question about I think on the prior one, you showed the side of the bus, which is different. Where right now it's like an all caps, kind of like an antique type font. And it was different with like kind of a yellow swoosh. Yeah, with like a serifont. Can you talk to us about your thinking on the rest of the side of the bus?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is pretty similar to the existing design of the King Street trolleys. The typography has been updated just a little bit for legibility. Currently, the trolleys have a very decorative kind of filigree in the background of the phrase King Street trolley. This swoosh was an idea that I came up with because it sort of mimics the swoosh that's on the rest of the buses. But this is, just something that I was playing around with to kind of think about ways to update the signs of the trolley, while incorporating, seeing where a new King Street trolley logo could fit, seeing where the dash logo could fit, and then thinking of ways to also update the sides of the trolley. I think also something else I changed on this is where it says free to ride. On the existing trolleys, it says from Market Square to the metro or from the waterfront to the metro. So that would be something to think about as these trolleys are replaced and redesigned, thinking about the messaging, making sure it's something that can last for the entire lifespan of the trolleys.
And I mean, obviously, we're back to Matt's point. I mean, I voiced this before. I'm actually in favor of not having free ride on it because I think it creates an unnecessary distinction from the rest of our service, which is right. Like I share this anecdote that I've been on King Street and I've overheard tourists now get on a dash bus and be like, wait, we gotta wait for the free to ride trolley. So I actually like striking that from the branding entirely has some meaningful benefits. Yep.
All the dash buses now say free to ride.
They do.
Oh, they do. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't noticed that.
Although it's on the driver's side, there is a big out, but it's not on the curb side.
Okay, I would.
On that for a
I would totally be in favor of going. Yeah, I'm in favor of going in that direction too. My point is just that all dash platforms indicate the same thing, so that people aren't making a distinction between types. And since I'm talking, I'm gonna say, this is fantastic work. I think it's awesome. I love it.
I just want to say, I also think it's fantastic, and I particularly on the logo really appreciate the prominence of Dash on the King Street Trolley redesign, because part of the challenge is I have overheard many people not understand that the King Street Trolley is part of Dash, right? And so that it's apples to apples, especially when you're down there and you've got like WMATA where you do have to get there. And so I think it's great to find that cohesion.
Can I, ask, are we doing anything, are we updating our signage at all? Because to the public comment earlier, I think that does make a lot of sense to actually put it on the sign somewhere that it's free to ride, because that's particularly in Old Town where you have a lot of tourists, they're looking at the signs, they're trying to understand the difference, and that's a great place for them to understand that it's free without having to have it in the logos. But I didn't know if we were doing anything with signage.
Well, yeah, and well, I mean, one other thing, your inspiration for the trolley logo of transit stamps, I think also lends itself to some really great collaborative branding. It's based at Alexandria, where you could do a transparent version of that does look like a stamp that could go on, on the website for different attractions that are serviced by the trolley. You can kind of have that almost looks like you got it stamped. And I just think it lends itself really nicely to some additional marketing opportunities.
I felt some loss with the Masonic Memorial, but again, the simplification is so important. But look out for the George Washington people around town.
Thanks, it's really helpful to go through all of it. Yeah, I was curious about the King Street Trolley logo and the decision not to italicize. It's already very excited, but is that just the vintage thing? Because it just sort of flows, right? It's an issue of consistency. So just curious about it.
I had mocked up both versions and through our feedback rounds and my own opinions, because the illustration of the trolley itself has a lot of vertical lines, including the kind of italicized version, just didn't visually work as well, and as well as the straight up and down kind of version, the non-italicized version. That was really the thinking behind it.
Got it. Thanks. And then, and I think this is also really fantastic and just really cool and interesting, and it's just great rebrands. I am wondering about the costs associated with this and the question of like, what is the value, and how is the executive team thinking about the value of doing this whole revamp across all of the collateral, buses and everything else at this point in time?
Yeah, I mean, and our intention is for this to be something that's done as things get placed or repaired or changed. We figured that it's going to be very low impact, if any. There are a lot of vehicles going to be on order. The trolleys, certainly replacement is a big piece of this. So getting that right when they're delivered. A lot of the rest of the use of this logo is often in vinyl. So like the buses are painted, but then there's just a vinyl sticker still stuck on the side, which is the logo. And those are often being replaced anyway and are very inexpensive things to update. But I think one of the things that I love, because I also sat down and didn't get to see it until it was put in front of me so I could react. I really appreciated how you can put these side by side and we're the same people. You unless you're really looking for it, might not even notice in some cases. And I think that I really appreciated how Jen mentioned, the identity that Dash has within the community and the brand recognition that we already have, and building upon that, as opposed to, what did you say? You said when you totally redo a brand, it's because you're trying to fix something that's broken. We're not broken. And so that's not what we're trying to do here, but we are trying to look at something that's been around for close to 40 years, if not that long, and say, gee, it's time to be modern about what we're doing. And so I really appreciated that. That's how this came through.
And thanks for calling that out, because that was my next question, is like, are there concerns from a brand transitioning or whatever you call it standpoint of doing the slow roll? I think the slow roll makes sense, and it's probably better in terms of cost. But that was a great point, that everything's pretty seamless and you can tell it's the same people and the same. So that's okay. Thanks.
And this is a great segue for this team who is now built out. Credit to Camilla for building a fantastic team that's really working on all these other initiatives around community awareness, engagement with Dash, knowing that we're free. All of these things that you all are talking about are things that this team is really energized to do. And so setting this up gives them that forward momentum to then be using this. You can talk about this, get the transit folks, right, Bob, excited about new collector items. You can show off and stamps and just all kinds of stuff, because I think it's really important for people to be energized by that stuff. And the last thing that she didn't mention that I really appreciate, and then we'll move on because we've got a lot of stuff to cover yet, but it's the bus graphic. In one presentation, she showed a picture of that just by itself, and there was talk of a mascot.
Yes, yeah.
So that could be a community engagement activity that is built around naming the mascot of Dash, and having some fun with that.
Yeah, not just the dash the bus. Yeah, we're gonna open
Well,
it
it's
up.
like our snowplows that are all. Yeah.
Just very quick follow-up, because you mentioned the trolley replacements. When we replace the trolleys, will we be able to get them in either the navy or the gold of the new logo? It's not lost on me that that we have brand consistency across our platforms, except for the red trolleys. So, right.
We've had a,
My team is because they brought that to me and I said, I don't like it. And the reason I said that is because the red to the trolley is a tie back to more of the streetcar era.
Sure.
And the idea around that. And to me, the trolley is very much a picture kind of thing and a fun thing to sort of reminisce. They did show us the trolley in blue, and to me, it doesn't look vintage anymore. And also, fun fact, ABMW, which is sort of the precursor to Dash, was red. So I think it's sort of a fun tie-in too, that Alexandria way back when had red running around on the streets. So that's why you hear all the laughter. Because they were in the same, they were saying, wait a minute, we should make it blue. And I said, no, like that.
It's also brick, and there's a lot of brick.
Yeah, and it stands out in photography in a way that's helpful. So, but thank you. You've definitely got a lot of minds thinking like yours.
I have one very quick question that maybe be part of this conversation, but as you're looking at we consolidated the bus stops now, are you looking at having probably on the same sign as the 3031? And is that something that would lend itself with these logos? Because I think that would also help with consistency, instead of having a separate sign flag for the trolley that's there. Is that something that you're looking at?
I would love to see, especially part of thinking about this logo design, one of the major applications that I did notice is that it's on the stop signs, which is why I wanted it to look and resemble so much the Dash logo. But yeah, I think as we move forward, rethinking how we can explain to people that can get on all three of these buses is part of that conversation. And as we update these signs, I think there's definitely a lot of room to reinforce that they're all free, they all have the same stops, and that they're all.
Okay, so we will move on. We've got two more presentations to get through. So welcome Martin up to brief you on the Alexandria Transit Strategic Plan. Just a quick reminder that this is separate from your board strategic plan, which we'll talk about any updates to in June.
All right. Josh, we'll take the mask off. So tested negative for everything on the sun, but just keep further away. I'm gonna hold it against you. Just kidding. Good evening. Tonight I'm going to be providing the draft presentation of the FY26 Alexandria Transit Strategic Plan. It's an update to our previous ATSP document. You recall last year we had a major change. We adopted our first ever ATSP based on new DRT state guidelines. That was a major update. We're required to do a major update every 5 years, so we don't have another major update until FY30. So this is the first of our 4 minor updates, which are in the form of addendums or updated addendums. And it's just meant to kind of refresh any changes in our service plans or capital program or things like that. So this is not an action item. There's no action item required. The full strategic plan is in your packet. It's also available at dashbus.com/strategic plan. Josh covered this pretty well. Our current service budget aligns with our current plan for FY26. You can see the stats there. Josh noted a lot of the positive aspects. We've got no service reductions, which is huge. We're very excited about that. We also are reapplying for our Creative Choice programs, which help on 35 and 36. The preliminary scoring has come back and it's very favorable for Dash. We're among the top projects in terms of scoring. So it's looking very promising. We won't know for sure until probably May or June, but I think it's very, very likely that we'll get that funding to continue that service. Should have looked at that picture before I made my comment about free ride.
I think Raymond, who, by the way, Raymond welcomed a new family member on Monday. So he is out on parental leave. But I think that was Ray out there actually drifting this bus in the snow because we got this picture sent and I thought, is he out there sliding around in the big snowstorm?
That bus was not stuck. I need to verify. So, next few slides just summarize the previous ATV unfunded improvements that Josh mentioned. We'll continue to keep on the radar. Top priority is line 32 that we talked about in the past. We did include a couple different versions of this as part of our ATSP, which included kind of partial improvements, either weekday only or for just part of the route. You can see the total cost was $850,000 annually, but if we did weekday only, it would be $460,000 annually. So we wanted to provide that information. Also have line 34, improving Sunday service from every 30 to 60 minutes. And then line 31, improving service in Old Town from every 30 minutes to every 15 minutes during off-peak periods. So those are the unfunded improvements that were mentioned earlier. One new thing that we included in this year's ATSP that I wanted to highlight is our Alexandria service evaluation. One of the outcomes of last year's ATSP was a recommendation to staff to evaluate service in Alexandria. Currently, there is not really Dash service in Alexandria north of Reed. I don't have a pointer, but you can kind of see Alexandria is the triangle. Reed Avenue is where that teal street is right there. That's line 33. We don't serve the majority of Alexandria. It's served by the Metro Bus 10A, 10B, which runs very frequently all day, 7 days a week. However, obviously we charge a fare. Dash does not. So there's an affordability complex there. Obviously, Alexandria is also a more sensitive community. It has lower income generally. So the ask was, can we find ways to modify Dash service to better serve that portion of Alexandria? So staff took that and looked at a couple different options. I could just note the 33, the teal route that I mentioned earlier. One of the options we looked at was rerouting that up to 4 Mile Run. And coming back, I don't have a map for it. I should have included a map, but just modifying that so it went up in Arlington and then back down at Potomac Yard. But that would remove service from Reed Avenue, which does have a decent amount of ridership. We also looked at modifying the 36, which is shown in purple, just kind of zigzagging up Executive Avenue. There were some challenging operating conditions with that. And then the last thing we looked at was line 34, which currently was shown in blue. It currently ends at Potomac Avenue, Potomac Yard, extending that to Alexandria. We looked at rider impact, cost, equity, and various other factors. So ultimately, the full study is available in Appendix B of the ATSP. But what we ended up recommending was an extension of line 34. Like I said, it ends at Potomac Yard, but this would eventually extend that all the way up to Alexandria and potentially even into Arlington Bridge slightly. So that would provide a new connection from Alexandria, Mount Vernon Avenue to Potomac Yard or direct, but also to some of the shopping centers in Arlington Bridge. There's the groceries, there's a giant middle school there. So there'd be additional connectivity and additional affordability for Alexandria residents there. And the other big benefit of this one is that there's no negative impact on existing Dash riders. All the other scenarios have some sort of deviation that would cost time for riders. So this one is just an extension, so it would not have a negative impact on any Dash riders.
Mark, what's the headway on that, on those?
Great question. Yeah. So line 34 shown here is every 30 minutes, 6 days a week, and then every 60 minutes on Sunday.
And I think AJ and I were the ones who asked for this, and really, that's great. I appreciate it all.
Sure. There was a cost I want to flag. It would additionally be an additional $600,000 annually. So need to factor that in and prioritize that with our other ATV and fund improvements that we're pursuing. There's also an annual, or excuse me, a bus. We would need an additional peak bus. Other two things that we need to make sure is, we have initiated some conversation with Arlington about this. But more discussion need to happen as this would need to turn around in Arlington. There's no way to turn around on Mount Vernon Avenue once you get, to the waffle shop, basically. And then we also, there's a intersection, Reed and Richmond Highway that currently has some raised islands in the middle of it, so you can't drive straight across. So that would also need to be taken under consideration.
It'd be great for Giant, if they want to, flex people between stores.
And just to close the loop on that last one, so we were not recommending that be included in FY26, that would be FY27 at the very earliest. Funding and bus availability. Better Bus Network has been covered pretty exhaustively, so I won't dwell too much on this, but as Taylor mentioned, it's launched in June. Mostly very positive outcomes for Alexandria. More information at Omana.com. We're coordinating with them very closely, and his team as well. More details on these can be found in the plan, but basically these are our improvements that we have slotted for FY27, 28. They haven't changed too much from what was presented last year. They just kind of pushed back 1 year. So 30 on Duke Street, certainly want to continue to improve service there when it's possible to do so. 32 want to continue to improve the headways, especially along the Outer Valley corridor. And then we also have the 103 and 104 here, as Josh mentioned. They're currently running every 30 minutes. We'd like to get them back to 20 minutes like they were before the pandemic. Keep going now. And just for the board's perspective, there are kind of 3 key dates coming up. Obviously, we have the draft presentation today. In April, we would have the public hearing where there's comments specifically on the plan, and then in May or June, we would be the for adoption. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Camilla. We can kind of talk about some of the outreach we're doing.
Hi, everyone. So we are going to be launching a survey next week. It has the option to give information on specific lines, but also just open feedback. That's going to be open next week, all the way to April 18th. There is a few, some of the meetings that are coming up. So March 20th, so next week, there's a city budget bonanza. So we're going to be part of that. This is being organized by the Office of Communications and Community Engagement. We do have the DAC meeting April 2nd, which we're going to be presenting at the DAC meeting to make sure that they're able to get the information and provide feedback on the strategic plan. And so like I said, we have the survey. It's going to be available in different languages, Arabic, Amharic, Spanish, English, and Persian. And it is like you would have dynamic information about demographics and open comment period, open comments. We are also going to be doing social media. We're going to have our website. We are going to have a news item, an e-blast that's going to be going out. And we are going to be at different community meetings. We have partnered with Alive to be part of some of the food hubs that they have around the city. We're working with Casa Chinulagua to be able to get some information from them about the Alexandria project and also some other community meetings that we're coordinating to make sure that we have them throughout the month. Any questions?
Yes. Is there any reason that the survey is not going to be in Dari or Pashto?
We didn't. So at the moment, we don't have a staff member that can kind of translate or check the translation for those languages. So that's the reason why we didn't provide them. But we can explore to see if there's maybe an external option.
Could we check with like Nova Rat or what is or like Afghan? There's a few different Afghan community-based organizations that I know for other things. So which is going to be really important because that's a
okay, yeah, we'll definitely look into having those surveys.
And just maybe one more question for Martin on the survey. So I appreciate the work that did on the Orlando piece, because I know Jason's not here tonight, but Councilman Gary has asked about that. At least the last couple of stockholder meetings, I think it's good that we have some feedback and some options that you said have no negative impacts on anyone else who rides the system. But as we're looking to add that as well as other improvements that are coming up along with the 3 unfunded improvements, we have to sort of start then to figure out prioritization for those and whether the 3 that are already existing or any of these other ones. Also considering changing circumstances like return to offices, we look at the peak period that's supposed to come into play, the improvements there in 27. I think it would be important for us to spend some time kind of going through those and getting maybe some staff recommendations on prioritization of those. So that way we can, begin to address our communications. Very soon we'll have to start messaging on those as well if we want to get additional resources to do any of them. But no, I appreciate the outreach plan. Sounds really good. I hope, we always get good suggestions about things that may not be on our radar screen, like the Alexandria piece that came out of other engagements. So appreciate what you guys are doing.
When we make recommendations like we are looking at with the 34, is that going into the overall Alexandria transit vision and updating that plan as well, or is it just living in these documents, these annual plans?
That's a really good question. We have deviated from the ATV, like based on like the West End Transitway needs, things like that. So we kind of view the ATV as kind of our view recommendation, the vision, that the ATV presented. I don't think we would go back like an ATV document itself, the vision document itself. I think it would more so be this ATSP. I think it can be the vision is kind of almost there's a lot in there, but I think the policy is the most important thing on the vision. So I think following what the recommendations for first coverage and then the things that were including the AM as well. I think is what's important there. Thank you. Last presentation, but a great one is welcome Natalie Harris. I don't know that you all have met Natalie yet. Some of you may have. Natalie is our director of fleet maintenance, doing a phenomenal job and helping us to maintain our fleet and build us up for the service levels we're providing. I do want to give a shout out to you that you were our VTLI or Virginia Transit Leadership Institute graduate as well. So Natalie has been participating in statewide programs as well in her role. But I'll turn it over to you. She's going to provide an overview of what the maintenance department does and some of the strategic goals that they are working on in their program. So, okay.
Good evening, as Josh mentioned, my name is Natalie Harris, and I have the privilege of serving as the director. A little bit about myself. I started working in transit when I walked into the transportation office at the University of Maryland as an undergrad student looking for a parking permit. And so they said, "Oh, do you have a job?" And I said, "No." They said, "You get a better parking space if you have work on campus." And so I said, "Oh, why not? Need a job, better parking." Although when I thought about this story, I said, I did wind up parking closer towards the farm, so I can't really speak for better parking. But as I continued, I pursued a degree in undergrad in economics. And at that time, I did get a chance to have the experience of working as a parts apprentice within the maintenance department. And from there, I worked up as the parts manager. Couple of years after I earned my degree in economics, it was during the time where diesel exhaust fluid after treatment was entering the industry. And so I became very curious of why it was hard first to procure parts, and then also the struggles that we were having just to maintain our vehicles and the issues that the trucking industry was having as well. And that led me to pursue my master's in acquisition and supply chain management. Through that, came across Dash and was very heavily interested in electric bus and that technology. And so I came to Dash as the parts manager and worked my way up to director of fleet maintenance. But enough about me. Let's talk about the amazing people that we have here that also work. As I mentioned, I'm the director. In the back, we have Tom Rose, who's my deputy director. And I'm sure he also has a lot of interesting stories to share He has been an integral part of serving the community for the city of Alexandria. And then under Tom, we have our parts and inventory supervisor, who supervises our parts clerks, who are responsible for parts procurement, inventory and organization of the parts room, warranty, and a lot of factors that relate to our PPE program. We also have our maintenance manager, who oversees our shop supervisors, who are responsible for bus assignments, hands-on training and development, and the day-to-day activities. Mechanics who keep our buses running. We have our service workers and our bus cleaners. And I will kind of pause a little bit as I'm looking at this picture. Near the yellow bollard, that's Maria Bolanis, and she is our maintenance employee of the year. And just to share, Maria is one of those employees that takes a lot of pride in her work. She is always there to assist her workers. Anything that you need, Maria is that employee. So I'm actually very proud that I added her before I even thought about talking. So some of the issues and things that we deal with, while I discussed us having an amazing team, are staffing levels, which are a challenge, right? As our fleet grows and it ages and it evolves, one of the challenges having enough staff to address that need, the needs of a mixed fleet. Because you can see we currently have a fleet that's 38% of hybrid electric buses, clean diesels are 30%, electric is 12%, and as we discussed earlier, that number is only going to continue to grow. And then that other percentage are support vehicles. And our mechanics are responsible for maintaining every one of those vehicles within our fleet and learning that technology that it requires to maintain the fleet. So speaking of that, some of our challenges, I guess what I would say is the beauty of working at Dash is when someone comes, they stay, right? And of course, that's particularly important in maintenance, is that they're able to gain knowledge and valuable knowledge and impart that to new employees. However, one of the challenges that I face is I have one of my mechanics 30 years, and I can name a series in our fleet or I can name a bus number, and they can tell me what modifications have been made on that bus. Sometimes that bus can be temperamental, that bus needs that extra 10 minutes to be warmed up, whatever it may be, right? But I do not have the luxury of having a workforce now that's interested in joining maintenance. It is estimated that, looking at the age of my staff, that I would have about 2 retiring each year. And so with fewer candidates entering the workforce, there's also current language that's in our CBA that kind of puts us in the behind the ball a little bit to be competitive to other transit agencies. And then another is going to be the technology, right? As advancement as technology is made, training has become a challenge, not only for the staff, but the trainers that are facilitating this training as well. And one of the things that we look at is having the goal that all levels of leadership within maintenance is trained on basic a basic maintenance orientation. And that standardized training is making them equipped to assist and train the new staff that we are trying to bring in. And this training consists of utilizing our fleet management software. One of the things that we go from in learning and maintenance is where we once had Cummins Insight or Allison Doc to diagnose a engine or a transmission problem. Today's mechanics are faced with utilizing software for anywhere diagnosing an issue with your door, your HVAC system, with 2 different types of electric battery management systems and other technology like that. Not only is this a problem that we're addressing with the mechanics, but this is also something in the parts department. Regulations also play a huge factor. I know I mentioned this before when I was talking about my journey. One of the mandates a couple of years ago was that brake pads needed to have low to 0% copper in them, right? So whereas the parts department knew how many brake pads to stock, in order to make sure that the mechanics could perform these repairs. They now have to figure out, are we changing brake pads at where we used to change them maybe at 30,000 miles, we're changing them at 15,000 miles, right? And that's one of the collaborations where mechanics and parts department work on, but that's also putting the mechanic where this was a job that you typically could schedule and engage in knowing you're having to do more often. So a little more about some of the strategies that we're working on. We're standardizing training, right, for each section of the department. Not only with one of the things that I mentioned with the parts department, but it's also addressing going beyond cycle counts, going beyond ordering, customer service, and then really just teaching them how to look at schematics and looking at wire diagrams, because in that information is a lot of hidden part numbers that is critical for them to find and also help the mechanics get buses back in service. Really looking at the tasks that we're expecting for each section to perform and how we can write SOPs, how we can address training. We're providing different PPE and other additional resources needed in order for the staff to be successful and also feel supported, which is critical. Another example that we're working on is also for our parts department to understand warranty and different components that are considered under warranty. Right? When you're looking at the budget, one of the things that you want to make sure is, yes, that battery may be 12 years, but what's considered a battery, right? And so we're working on developing them in that area as well. Cross-sectional training, that's really key for me. And what I call it cross-sectional training is because we're the maintenance department, but we all have different sections. One of the examples of that is I scheduled preventative maintenance for the mechanics to review one of our electric buses. But instead of just having mechanics in that class, I had one of our parts clerks sit in there. And that gave them an opportunity to look at what parts they're looking at, what fluids are needed, what greases, oils, all of those things that they can be better prepared when the mechanic is looking at the bus. It also gives them an idea of other items that the mechanic may not necessarily ask for that comes out of your needed inventory. Such as split loom, right? But that gives them a sense that, hey, that hose might be rubbing and they might need more split loom in stock in order to prevent that rubbing. And those are little things like that. One of the things that I also look at is that's very big is just working with the other departments that we have. Something that may seem small, but has worked tremendously is our training department, right? They are responsible for everybody receiving their CDL, making sure that they train them efficiently. Well, one of the things that I asked them and I added to it is when we have our service workers that they are brought through the bus wash. And like I said, it may seem small, but there's a lot of seasoned operators that scared to bring a bus through bus wash. And so just having that collaboration between the training department and our department has been a tremendous success and a help. And then it's also helped where our service workers, they are responsible for charging our buses at night as well as fueling them. And so making sure that I provide that instruction on training on the different chargers that we have. And then also just basic troubleshooting and understanding the difference between a sight glass on a diesel bus that looks like a circular window and then on an electric bus that actually looks more like a hose. And understanding those distinctions are one of the things that we're making sure that we're paying more attention to in each different section. Sorry. One of the things that I also want to make sure that I address, because it's also critical, is pairing up our mechanics with outside vendors. There are times when we do have large repairs or new repairs that our mechanics haven't experienced. There's times when if the bus is under warranty, this is going to be a new repair, but we're obviously going to have to address it later on down the line. And so it's critical that we're ensuring that the mechanics get paired up with these outside vendors so that they're able to learn. And then when the time comes that they're able to also take over those repairs as well. We've decided to also kind of look at other forms of standardized training, meaning not just sitting inside and looking at a PowerPoint slide, but also making sure that we provide hands-on training. A little bit of that was today, and part of the hands-on training, we've been blessed with having great trainers who are more inclined to go with a student-led approach. So today we had, and yesterday we had Thermo King, which is our HVAC system on our buses. And so we have that AC training. And so what I do is I kind of give them an outline of these are the certain subjects that I want you to go over with the staff. But then it gets led by the students, right? They start asking questions. And on top of what I do with that is I don't just stay with this is the latest system, right? That we have, the latest version. I bring in an older bus. And that way they can look at the differences, but then they can also talk about, and this is where that student-led portion comes in, is that the mechanic is able to say, well, I've had this trouble. How do you reprogram this? We deal with this. Oh, every time I look at this and I think it's fixed, and then 2 weeks later, the operator, brings this up. You can, the mechanic is able to bring that up with the older bus, and then the instructor is able to show you how to get ahead of that on the newer version, right? And then just looking at other forms of technology, which it helps engage a lot of younger mechanics that will be interested in maintenance, is bringing in, so out in Vegas, there's a transit agency that utilizes Google Glasses with Google Teams, right? And just like we would be having a Teams meeting, instead, the mechanic puts the glasses on and talks to one of the engineers. So they talk to the bus engineer and show them exactly what they're looking at, because as we know, before you talk to the engineer, they're like, no, go to page 119, it's right there. That's it's gotta be, that's the part number. And the mechanic's like, no, it's not. And instead of going back and forth, I'm gonna take a picture, I'm gonna send it to you, I'm gonna wait. No, let's look at this together right now and work on it and fix it. And then there's also, we looked into exploring training where they, instead of having your general 2D model, they take a component and it's 3D. And so they break that component out. And so that's also another level of training for the mechanic, instead of the ones that may not or be a little apprehensive of putting their hands on the bus. They can now still look at the model and get an understanding of how a component works and what will be needed in order to make that repair or make that fix. So some of the collaborations that I've had an opportunity of working with outside of our departments, Northern Virginia Community College, I had the opportunity a couple of months ago to speak to some high school guidance counselors. And so some of the questions that they asked was, what are some of the things that I should be telling the professors and the teachers that would help the student be ready to work in maintenance? And then what are some of the things that I should tell the students that would make them interested in working in maintenance? And so for me, the foundation with maintenance is in everything. A lot of times we don't look at it as a whole, but with maintenance, you have customer service skills, you have communication skills, you learn budgeting, you learn to read schematics and wire diagrams. And maybe you're not fixing a car, but you are able to hang a light in your house, right? And then of course there is that maintenance aspect where you are able to make those repairs. And something that I say, a little prideful, but I always say, if the whole world decided to just run planes, trains, and buses, you still need a mechanic. If the world decided everybody's driving a car, guess what? Still need a mechanic, right? And so we've also had the opportunity of being able to work with our local emergency response unit, particularly something that stands out, because this was a little bit recent, was working with our Arlington Fire Department and also working with Alexandria Fire Department. And that's just bringing them in and having them familiar with the bus, right? If there are events that they need to respond to, we want to show them, hey, this is the master battery cutoff switch. And then in turn for them, they came and they certified my staff in AED and CPR training, right? So just having that relationship with those that work in the community is really key for us. And lastly, something that I am particularly also proud of is our collaboration with the International Transportation Learning Center and also with WMATA. And so what that was we were approached with them wanting to develop a battery electric bus familiarization course, just a basic course. And so we had dash buses in there, we had our mechanics, and the mechanics are showing how to put on PPE. They're pointing out different functions and components on the bus. And the great part was after all of that was done, they asked us to come back and present to us to see how well the training course went. And when they came back, at that time, we had one new mechanic, one C mechanic that just started. And then we had some of the mechanics that were in the video. And to see their face, right, to see themselves on screen, that was one of the things that I look forward to continuously instilling is that, because that's pride, that's confidence, and that's where you're going to get the best work out of them, right? And then that also shows that brand new C mechanic, hey, look at some of the stuff that we're doing. You want to tell your friends about becoming a mechanic. That's Dash meetings.
You know, with the cutbacks at the federal government level, is there any way you may be able to find some mechanics from that group of employees?
Well, we are definitely, and as I kind of mentioned, with HR, we definitely look for that collaboration, and HR does an excellent job of searching and finding any available opportunities that we can.
How many are you down?
Mechanics, we are down about 6.
And what do you have, around 19 or 20 or?
Yeah, right now we're at 13.
Oh, okay.
The goal is to be closer to
19, 20, yes.
That's what we're funded at right now.
Yeah.
What was the challenge you referred to in the CPA?
So currently in the language for us, and I'm sure this is also another thing that we can work with collaborating with HR is our CBA only allows us to hire at step 1. And step 1 means step 1 salary. And so what you want to acknowledge is that if we're looking for, just like your question where you're asking, how many mechanics are we down? Is that down C, which is that's an entry level mechanic, which is going to take a lot more training, or are we down A mechanics, right? That have been in the business and they know their way and they only need that next step of training. And so what that does is how that challenges us is that if I have a great A mechanic that does want to come to Dash, but they've worked in the business 15 years, I cannot reward their years of service. I have to bring them in at step 1. And that's not competitive to any other trades agency.
Yeah, we've got a collective bargaining coming up next year. And as you may recall, maintenance joined the same local and the same unit as the drivers. And when they did that, they just folded them under the existing CBA, which is entirely written for bus operators. So we're going to really be able to parse out more of the language around maintenance and try to fix a lot of that. But I think the problem will persist, and I think it's an industry-wide problem in the sense that there is always a mentality of you have to start and work through your seniority. And that's not only with pay, but that's also with your schedule. So you come in and you're the lowest paid and you're likely to be asked to work overnight or on weekends exclusively. And so that further compounds the issue. You sort of have this sort of constant challenge at the very bottom of the pay scale. But we may be able to tackle some of the pay related inequities that exist relative to places like Vermont and others in the future, but it's likely to persist that problem will always be the case as far as when you start, where you start, what kind of shifts you have.
Yeah, we'd heard from HR a few months ago, talked about some of the recruitment they're doing specifically. And so has that bought in a pipeline of new talent? I realize that they've been the entry level mechanics, but what has that experience been like? And are you seeing good people who have a good future?
So we have actually had the opportunity to brought in 2 new C mechanics and they are working very well. They're actually accelerating a lot quicker than I think what we thought. So that we're particularly proud of. And I will definitely say that HR continues to be dedicated to bringing in a lot more talent that we're going to need.
Thanks for the presentation. Just curious about maintenance issues that are covered by warranties. Is it always the case that there's a third-party contractor that performs the main or the, I guess, the services under the warranty that come in, or how does that play out?
No, that does not always need to be the case. So we have a negotiation with different manufacturers, what our warranty labor rate is going to be. And with that, then we see reimbursement if we perform the repair. And that's why it's very critical for when we're going through that initial warranty period of when we receive new buses, is that we're pairing up our mechanics. Because my thing is, learn the first time, the next time we get paid to do the work, right? So yeah, that's key in working on that.
But that's not always the arrangement. There are instances where somebody else comes in to perform the services. Are there ever instances where the buses or components have to be sent somewhere else for them to be repaired?
There's one particular instance right now, and that's kind of a little bit of an outlier. Usually you don't have to send a component out to be repaired. The company will send it to you, and then you need to send the defective one back. The one that I'm referring to is with Phoenix Motors. But yeah, usually that's not the case. Usually they will have a component for you to swap out.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Business come before the board this evening.
One quick thing. So some of you know that I joined the board from C. I ran into fellow team members a couple of weeks ago, and we were catching up. And she reminded me that when I was on the DAC, we would often talk about getting together with the board and having kind of like so nothing urgent, but I just wanted to bring that up and suggest or throw that on people's radars. If I don't know, Josh or Bethany, if you guys are up for coordinating, I think it would be great to get the bodies together. It didn't happen during my time on the DAC. I think that's something that they would definitely need here. I would also be here to.
We've had some conversation about doing that. I think it would be great if we could find sort of a topic that we would all benefit from learning about, in addition to the fellowship that would come from just networking with each other. But Dean had introduced me to a couple of the DAC members who at the ridership celebration who had said that same thing. So I had passed that along to Josh to share with Camilla, but as they were also transitioning to a new chair at that point, so I wanted to give that person kind of opportunity to kind of get their, feel for how they wanted to run the board, but and then look for ways we can collaborate. And even Nathan was at our meeting last month and I spoke during the public participation. So I hope that we'll have good collaboration. And I think it's a great idea for us to be able to do so. We did something with the Transportation Commission, I think, similar to that as part of the new Dash network. I mean, this is really kind of a networking, but we sat together and had a work session together. So I think something along those lines would be really helpful. So appreciate you bringing that up. And certainly if they have ideas of things that they would like to do with us, I think that would be helpful. Some of the planning, So.
I think a great way for us to look at it would be maybe a joint meeting at some point, potentially in the fall. The one thing we have to keep in mind is, depending on the nature of the getting together, you all are required under public meeting laws. You have more constraints than they do, because they're not a public entity in that same sense. But maybe them coming to be a part of your meeting solves that and makes that work quite well. So that could be something for us to look at as we plan out the fall.
Yeah, and I think also the lens through which they operate is a little bit different in that they're advising you and kind of providing any feedback based on what they perceive customer issues or rider issues to be. It's a little bit different, obviously, than the broader scope that we look at everything through. But I'm sure there are great joint projects and opportunities to consider stuff.
Maybe next time we have a retreat, we have a joint retreat, because that's a little less formal anyway.
Yeah, I think certainly we'll look to them for input on how they would to join us. Probably, I imagine in the evening, just given their work schedules. Many of them are probably in the workforce too. Our next board meeting will be back at Dash headquarters, will be April 9th, 5:30 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn? First, is there a second? Second, for each. All in favor?
Thank you, everybody. Good night. There's stuff still in there.